Hi, welcome back to the channel, and this is Motion Graphics Basics episode 2. And in this video we'll be covering explosions using stroke width and trim paths. I will be covering a little bit of trim paths in this video, but if you want a more in-depth explanation on trim paths, we have covered that in episode 1, which I will put somewhere in the screen. So these are examples of explosions in motion graphics. You can consider explosions as an icing in the cake, but it's not the cake itself. The cake is always the message, the hero is always the message. And effects such as explosions act only as a support. I mainly use explosions to guide the viewer's eye to a certain area. It's like saying to a viewer, watch here, there's an important thing going on here. And one common mistake beginners make is to splatter a lot of effects in their motion graphics piece. And that defeats the purpose of explosions. Because if you splatter effects, you're not guiding the viewer's eye to where you want them to look. You're actually confusing them. So now let's get into how to make these explosions. So there are two parts to explosions. The first part is appearing animation and the second part is disappearing animation. So first we need to figure out how to reveal the effects. Once it's revealed, we need to remove it. So we need an appearing animation and then a disappearing animation. So I have opened here After Effects 2021, and let's create a new composition here, and that's all good. I'm just gonna change the duration of this. So now we have a comp, and so I'm gonna first start using trim path. So I'm just gonna remove the fill color to empty, and the stroke, maybe choose a color you want. I think I'm gonna use red, and the stroke width is 7 pixels. I think that's fine. So just create a line anywhere like that, and we have this is going to be our first line for the effect. Imagine that this is going to be an exploding effect, and we're gonna duplicate this later on. I think the thickness of this is too thin, so let's increase this to, let's say, 15. I think that's good. So now let's also move the anchor point to the center. So I'm just gonna press Y and then change the anchor point here. So I prefer to work that way, that it's at the center of the shape. So now let's add trim paths to this. So let's expand this and click the add right here and then choose trim paths. So we have here the start and end properties. We're going to keyframe both of them, and let me zoom in the timeline. So first we're gonna create the appearing animation, meaning from nothing to something, right? So let's start our end with 0, and I'm gonna move forward in time and make this to 100. So this is our appearing animation. Now let's animate the disappearing animation. So let's move the start keyframe right here to here, because that's where the disappearing animation would end. I mean, the disappearing animation would start, and I'm gonna move forward in time and then move the start to 100. So that would be our disappearing animation. So this part here, this is our appearing animation, and this part here is our disappearing animation. So let's just easy ease this. So click F9, the F9 key, and let's take a look. So that's going to be our explosion. Now I'm just going to adjust the path of this. So in order to do that, click the pen tool or click G on your keyboard and click this point. See that I don't want that. See, it's because it's like that. There is this bit round here, and it's making a weird shape. So I'm just gonna change it to that. So now we have our first part of the explosion. Now we can also overlap the appearing and disappearing animation. Like the appearing animation is not yet finished, we could already start the disappearing animation. So it's gonna look something like that. I think that's good. So now that we have finished this, so I'm just gonna press the U key, and I'm gonna duplicate this. The shortcut for that is Command D or Control D on Windows. So now I have two of them, and then I'm gonna change the path of this, or we can just move this and change the rotation. The shortcut of the rotation tool is W on your keyboard, so I could rotate this and then duplicate again, move this somewhere, and then rotate this, duplicate, then rotate. And it's going to have that effect. And you could also offset, so I'm just gonna press the U key so we could see all of the keyframes right here. You could also like delay some of this so they won't start at the same time. So it's going to have something like that kind of effect. And you could also change the width, I mean the length of this by pressing the pen tool, or the shortcut for that is G on your keyboard. And then let's adjust and just make sure that it's not this, see that plus sign that's going to add a point. Make sure that the icon is this black arrow. See, once you click that, meaning you could adjust the path. And just make sure that it's not like this. See, if there's going to be a circle beside the pen tool, meaning it's gonna close the shape. So we're not going to do that. Okay, just make sure that the icon is this black arrow, meaning you could adjust or move the point. So that they're not at the same length, right? So it's gonna be something like that. And if you're using the new version of After Effects, there is now a taper tool. So I mean, we could now taper the stroke. So that's also another option we could use. So for this, for example, so move forward in the timeline that you have a considerable amount of length for that one specific effect, and then click this expand this shape, the contents, and go to shape, go to the stroke, and then there's taper right here. You expand the taper, and now you can play around with the settings right here. So we can have the start length to 100 and the end length to 100. So it's gonna have that effect. And if you want, because the taper is making the line a bit thinner, now we can click this and just change the stroke width to something a bit thicker, so that it's more noticeable. So let's do the same for the other line. So go to the stroke, go to taper, and then adjust the start length and end length. So I just would like to use 100% on both the start and end length. And let's do the same for the other shape as well. So you can also try an experiment, because different values for these properties would give you a different look. So now we have this effect. If that is too slow for you, then just change the timing of your animation. Right? So the closer they are to each other, these keyframes, the faster the animation is. And the other way to change this is the ease. So we're just using easy ease as of the moment, but you could also change, if you know how to use ease, you could also change that using the graph. But we're not gonna discuss that anymore because that could take up one whole another different video for just to discuss the ease. But that's one way to do this. So this is now the effect. Now let's so I think I want them to start at the same time. So now we could group this. So what I usually do in projects is group this or pre-comp this. So I'm gonna select everything, all of this, and press Command-Shift-C on if you're using a Mac, or Control-Shift-C on a Windows. What that would do is that would open up this pre-compose window. So let's just rename this to effect. Now we have a comp here that we could use for the effect. So now we can just duplicate this and maybe rotate this and maybe change the color. So if you want to change the color without going inside the composition, you could always use the fill effect. So you can go here at effects and preset and type fill, and it's here. So and change this to whatever color that you want. And maybe let's rotate this and have this in a different scale, maybe a bit smaller. Or we could also offset the timing. So next, what I'm going to discuss is how to do an explosion using the stroke width. So let me just hide this. Or we have here comp 1. Let's just rename this to effects set 1. Now let's create a new composition. This would be I'll just rename this to circle explosion set. So we are now at the circle explosion set composition, and now there is this trick I want to teach you on how to do this kind of explosion. So let's select the ellipse tool and just make sure that your fill is empty and you have a stroke with a high stroke width. So I think this would I think I'm gonna start with 200 pixels for this, and now I'm gonna create, and just make sure that you just barely enough that you can't see that circle, that hole in the center. So something like that. And then let's change the anchor point to the center right here. And if you didn't know what the purpose of this anchor point is, if we rotate this, see, it's gonna be based on the anchor point. If we're going to scale this, it's gonna be based on that where the anchor point is. So that is why we want to put this at the center, so that when we scale this later on, it's going to have that scale. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna create first the appearing animation of this, right? So the appearing animation for this would be the scale. So I'm gonna keyframe that, and I'm just gonna move this forward in time because this is our the end of the animation. The start of the animation here would be 0. So our appearing animation would be, the scale would start from 0 to 100. So that would be our appearing animation. Our disappearing animation is, I'm gonna expand this and click the content ellipse, and I'm gonna go to stroke, and let's find the stroke width here, the stroke width. And I'm just gonna press U so that it would only show me the keyframes. And the disappearing animation would be from the stroke width, starting from 200, it would be going to 0. So now we have this effect, this exploding effect. Now, I'm just gonna select the keyframes and easy ease this. So press F9 on your keyboard. So it's going to have that. So now we have both of this, right? The scale is our appearing animation, and our stroke width is our disappearing animation. And now we could make an overlap, right? So that even if it hasn't finished the appearing animation, we could already start the disappearing animation. And if that is too slow for you, I think it's a bit slow for me, so I'm just gonna move this back so that it's a bit faster. Or I think that's already too fast. And that's how you do an exploding animation using stroke width. So it's a combination of the scale and the stroke width. So again, that's how you think about this explosion animation, is that what would be your appearing animation and how would you make it disappear? So think about the appearing animation and the disappearing animation. And normally once I've finished this, I pre-comp this. So I Command Shift C or Control Shift C on a Windows, and let's just rename this to Circle Explosion. And normally what I do in projects is that I combine effects. So we have this effect we've done earlier. So we can combine both of them and change the color of this. I'm gonna use the fill effect. So I'm gonna select this layer so that the fill effect is gonna be applied on that layer, and then double click this. So currently the fill is red. Let's change this to, let's say, cyan, and it's going to have that effect. So the last thing that I'm gonna show you would be that circle explosion effect. So let's create again a new composition, and let's just use a circle for this. So click the ellipse tool, and let's have a fill color. And now we're not gonna need anymore the stroke. So I'm gonna select empty for this, or none. So there's no stroke, just fill. So now I'm gonna create my circle, and I'm just gonna make the anchor point at the center of this. And what we're gonna do is first I'm going to add a position animation. So starting from here, I'm gonna move forward in time and animate this to the left, and select this and F9, easy ease. And then we're gonna use scale to appear and disappear this animation. So from 0, so I'm gonna click 0 here, from 0 to 100 and back to 0. So in this case, my appearing animation and disappearing animation is only using one property. So select all of them and click F9, easy ease. Then I have this effect. I think we could also extend the position so that it's the movement of the position would be just a subtle movement. So once that is done, what I usually do, since we already have this animation, right, is we can pre-comp this again, and I don't know what to name this. What do we name this? Effect part 1. I think that would be good. And what we normally do in projects to create effects is we just duplicate them and just change the rotation. So something like that, and just duplicate them again, duplicate, and duplicate, and that would create a very distinct shape. And those different combinations of animation and shape, we're using circle, but you could also use square or triangle or a star or whatever you want, and it's gonna give your explosion effect that distinct look. Now this one, we can consider this as one effect, right? Now, so this alone, so what I did, if you didn't know, is this is the solo, meaning it's only going to reveal this part in my preview. So that's what it meant, just in case you didn't know. So this alone, that cannot be considered an effect, right? It doesn't, it's just one part of the effect. But this whole thing, this now can be considered like one effect. This could be a popping effect. So let's select all of this and pre-comp this, and maybe rename this as effect set 2. Okay, so now we could combine those different effects that we made and create another distinct effect, right? So the possibilities of this are actually limitless. And then we can add the first line explosion that we did on top of this, and just place it here. Maybe add a fill effect and just change the color. And let's make them let's move back this circle explosion. So now you have a new effect for this. And there you go. That's how we do effects animation that's used in motion graphics piece. So I'm going to post the project file of this on Patreon in case you want to check it out. I will leave the link in the description below. But I hope that I made this tutorial easy enough to follow that you don't need the project file anymore. But just in case you just want to check it out, it is there in the description below. And for our Patreon page, if you support us on Patreon for $5 a month, not only you get access to this project file, but also to all of the other project files that we post on Patreon monthly. And I think that's it. If you like this video, if this video helped you, I would appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up. I believe that it would help with the algorithm to get this video to other people who might benefit from this. And if you wanna watch more videos like this in the future, please subscribe. And I hope to see you on the next video.